price of digital gold, Bitcoin, and the price of physical gold has been highly correlated during many key periods during the past few years. And gold, the yellow shiny metal, is in a very key point in the chart right now. So I think what will happen next with gold price, like today, this week, this month, that's what will determine what will happen next with Bitcoin price. I'll tell you exactly how. Now, if you're less than 400 years old, or if history just wasn't your thing in school, now is the time to wake up, because now you can use it to make money. Sweden was actually the first European country to print banknotes in 1661. That's a good 100 years before there even were banks in the US, for example. It didn't really work out, and there's a huge lesson in it applicable to Bitcoin and crypto today, almost 400 years later. What the bank dude did, Johan Palmstruch, was that he ran two businesses. On one side, people could deposit their big and heavy copper coins, and on the other side, he ran a lending business, lending out the money for interest. Then, when the government changed the copper contents in the coin, suddenly all the account holders demanded the return of the copper daler that they had deposited, since it was now worth more as metal than as coins. And the bank couldn't do it, because they had lent out the money as loans on the other side. What to do? The dude walked back and forth. Then he cracked it. I write a banknote instead, a banknote valid for redeeming 10, 25, 50 or 100 silver dollar. They became very popular because they were easier to put in the pocket or even send remote by mail. He signed them himself. You can see where this is going. They realized that they can soon print unlimited of these. Just sign another one. And then in 1663, as lending increased, he had a booming lending business. He just printed more and more banknotes. And by autumn 1663, notes had become so many that the value of banknotes began to fall. Then people came to the bank and wanted their copper and silver coins back. And the bank started saying no. And already in October 1664, they stopped paying out coins completely. Then what happened? Well, Palmstruch was put in jail. But the bank license was transferred to Riksständer's Bank, operated by the parliament. And they remembered this failure for a good 100 years, but then began issuing banknotes again. And this bank is Sveriges Riksbank, the central bank of Sweden, still today. So what does any of this have anything to do with Bitcoin or gold? This. Why? Because someone like Johan Palmstruch and his modern-day successors can't print more of it at will. If we load TradingView, it looks like gold was fairly stable here in the 50s. That's the 1850s. Then a big run-up happened in the 1930s. Then it was fairly stable through the 40s, the 50s, that's the 1950s, and the 1960s. But then the big boom in gold really happened here in the 1970s. From 35 to 870. So if you wonder why boomers like gold, it's because they made huge money on it. This could be any crypto chart, just on a different time frame. But then gold didn't recover back to those levels for the entire 80s, the entire 90s. Only in 2008, price crossed above that all-time high. And then came the financial crisis. So if you don't respect Peter Schiff for his patience yet, now is the time to begin, because imagine the patience you need to trust in something that long. Not sure I could do it. But then price continued up to a high of 1912 in August 2011. Then price dropped to $1,000 again, but moved into this ascending triangle, which broke out 2019. And now let's switch to daily candles to look in more detail. If we first look at this, in March 2020, something happened here that took me by surprise. Something that I'm still upset about, that I hadn't studied properly. This was the COVID dip, right? At that time, the pandemic seemed really scary, like something might actually happen. And I thought that reasonably, if the world is in turmoil, something scary is happening, flight to safety means gold, right? But what I didn't think about is this. When everyone's assets dump, all the assets, your stocks, your crypto, your real estate and so on, people get liquidated and they have to sell other assets to cover it. Like their gold. Or if they have a fund which is supposed to have a certain percentage balance, they have to sell gold too to rebalance. And what annoys me is that I should have known that, because that's exactly what happened in the first stage of the financial crisis in 2008. So even though that there was a seemingly world-ending event there in March 2020, where gold should shine, right, it still dumped first. And only then the fundamental elements come into play and price go back up as fiat inflates and there is desire to park assets in the most stable thing we can think of, which for hundreds or thousands of years has been gold. And sure enough, just as it did in the second phase of the financial crisis, price of gold really surged in the rest of 2020 to a high of $2,075 on August 7, 2020. But then, as risk appetite came back in the world, gold backed down to a low of 1676 in March 2021, only 1 year after the COVID dip. So everyone criticizing Bitcoin for being volatile. Yeah, look at gold. You can't run a low margin, precise business model on top of gold either. It still turned out useful. And now look at what gold is doing right now. Price has formed a very well-defined symmetrical triangle, and right now price is just at the breakout point. Today. So what does that mean for Bitcoin? Let's first look at the correlation between Bitcoin and gold, because there are periods where it has been super correlated. Now, Bitcoin is the bars and the red line here is gold. The magnitude of the swings are different, which makes this a little bit harder to see possibly, but the direction is correlated. Not always, but at many key moments. For example, here during the COVID dip, you can see it's super clear here. And these were big moves. Bitcoin from 10,000 to 4,000. Gold smaller in percentage, but big for being gold. And if we zoom out a little, we see it even clearer. And look here during the autumn of 2020. It's almost like it's the same chart. But then towards the end of 2020 and in the beginning of 2021, the correlation definitely ended and it almost became inversely correlated, meaning they move in opposite directions. But then look here at the rest of 2021. While this dump here happened earlier in Bitcoin, it did follow in gold. And then look here, from mid-2021, correlation started again. This whole move up, back down again, and touch support basically on the same day and starting another move up. This is October-November 2021, and if we continue here, you see how it continued. Here's September 29. This move here, the slight retracement, the seemingly breakout in Bitcoin in November 2021 where we thought we were out of the woods, is exactly the same as gold. But then gold turned down and so did Bitcoin. And gold looked bad here in end January 2022 and so did Bitcoin, but gold found new life and broke above these levels and so did Bitcoin. And in fact gold has even broken through this high here just about, and also Bitcoin looks promising on the way up. Gold is in a super key moment. It just needs a little push past this level, just a little more money printing by Palmstru's successors. Bitcoin is hesitating here, and I think now is a point where clues from other markets really play a role. Before we continue to the conclusion, if you appreciate this, please like and subscribe, and I also want to recommend you to watch 3 videos after this one. Number 1, we've seen how correlated Bitcoin has been with, for example, Nasdaq. I talked about that in this video. And number 2, if you're not familiar with the greatest tool on earth, TradingView, and how I'm using it here is my free TradingView tutorial. And number 3, after the Bitcoin wrap, I talk about the outlook for Bitcoin to actually replace gold. Please watch that as well. Highly recommend it. To the conclusion now. I've seen politicians fail in their leadership all over the world through the past 2 years, and I've become increasingly fond of hard money. And clearly, I'm not alone, because just look at both the Bitcoin chart and the gold chart since March 2020. So whatever people are saying on social media, whatever the criticism there has been of Bitcoin and people laughing on Peter Schiff and other gold fans, well, big investors have been buying Bitcoin and buying gold, both. And I will monitor this symmetrical triangle on gold as a hawk. If it breaks out here, that will add another weight on the side of upwards continuation for Bitcoin. And while you sadly can't put it on your head, I'm more of a digital guy myself, so I still prefer the digital gold. only get your Larsen Line access from ctolarsen.com, and see you in one of the 3 videos I mentioned. Thank you, tack. CTO Larsen out. Hej då!